Governor Whitman, we've heard climate change referred to as a hoax over the last 4 years of the Trump administration. As the former head of the EPA, Governor, what concerns you the most for New Jersey as a state that's densely populated, a coastal state, and still with the #1 Superfund sites in the country?
Well, I think you just listed everything, Kent, that is a concern and why we should be concerned. You know, the Regional Plan Association put out a map of what the impact of sea level rise will be on the shore communities, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. And the impact is pretty visible when you look at that map. And then you look at what's happened over the last subsequent 5 years, 6 years. It's happening. Climate change is occurring. And most of the people in this country recognize that. In fact, every poll that's been taken, not that you can trust polls much anymore, but to the extent that you can, has shown that better than 50% of the American people see that climate change is occurring and they believe we should do something to address it. And unfortunately, this administration has taken exactly the opposite attitude. They have withdrawn us from the Paris Climate Accord. There was really nothing in there that was mandatory. The only thing that was mandatory in that was reporting how your progress was going or not. But once you take yourself out of that kind of a thing, you no longer have a seat at the table to help influence what others are doing. Just as of July 8th of this year, we'd had 10 major climate-related, weather-related incidents, from which it cost us $1 million to recover from each one of those. And that was just 10 before the fires in California and Washington State and Oregon, before the hurricanes that we've been hammering the Gulf Coast. So, I mean, lives have been lost, people's livelihoods have been lost, it's affecting crops, it's affecting everything. And New Jersey is a particularly vulnerable state.
So that we can better understand as citizens of the state, let's take one of those regulations, the Trump plan to roll back automobile emissions from 5% to 1.5%. What are the implications for society and something like that?
Well, tailpipe emissions are enormously polluting. Particulate matter 2.5 is, PM 2.5 as it's called, is a pollutant. It is bad for lungs. It can exacerbate and cause heart disease. It exacerbates things like asthma attacks. It's bad stuff. And the tragedy with this was car manufacturers were already moving toward the higher standards. They thought the Obama administration standards went too far too fast, but they were already moving in that direction. And in fact, before the president did the rollback, you had the heads of at least 4 of the major car manufacturers going to him and saying, don't do this. Don't do this. We're already geared up for this. And for those who are multinational, and just about every car company that I can think of is multinational, they have to meet standards in the rest of the world. And the rest of the world takes this issue seriously. And so it's 2 standards. That makes it more expensive for them. It's more complicated for them. It just made no sense to do this. And it is putting us, when you have a state as heavily traveled as our state, we are the most densely populated state. In those dense areas, pollution from cars, from old polluting cars, is a real health hazard.
What is the mission? Define it for us, Governor Whitman, of the EPA.
Well, it's very simple. It's to protect human health and protect the environment. That's it. It doesn't say how to do it, although the enabling legislation set up a lot of what to do and how to do it when the Congress put those together. But the mission of the agency is just to protect and base it on science. And that's the key here. You know, policy always affects a regulation. At the end of the day, it's a policy decision, but it should be based on science, not on politics. And unfortunately, what we've seen, particularly under this administration, is decisions being made based purely on politics, where science had nothing to do with anything. And that goes back, you know, your first question about what's the thing that worries me the most. It's true for New Jersey as it is for everywhere, but it's really true for the United States as a whole, is this denigration of science, this attitude that science doesn't matter, that we can ignore it. We ignore it at our own peril. And unfortunately, when you see young people deciding on a career, why would you decide on science if you're being told it's irrelevant? It doesn't make a difference. We're not going to pay any attention to it. You certainly wouldn't go into government science. Although I would think perhaps that with this pandemic and the rush to get a vaccine, people would say science is pretty darn important.
So, how is confidence restored? How do the American people get convinced that science is real, that public health is a real concern? And what are your hopes in a Biden administration that could help to bring about that restoration of confidence?
Well, it takes the leader. It takes the person with the bully pulpit. And we have had a person with the bully pulpit who has just been in denial from the very beginning about climate change, about science, about the COVID uh, pandemic. And with Joe Biden, we're going to get somebody that is going to stand up and say, this is real. We're going to base our decisions on science, as you see with the task force, the coronavirus task force he's put together of doctors and scientists. That's who he's going to listen to. Now, yes, he will have policy within that, how far you go, those kinds of decisions, but they will be based on science.
Is this effort going to take a look at the budget itself for the Environmental Protection Agency to start there and then bring in local and state and federal leaders to join in this effort?
The budget is the most significant policy document that an administration has, because that tells you whether you're serious or not. And this administration, the Trump administration, has been starving the Environmental Protection Agency and frankly, every other agency throughout federal government that had much to do with science. NOAA, Department of Interior, Department of Agriculture, where they have scientists, they've all been underfunded. They have been, if they didn't adhere to the party line, they've been moved into positions where they may not have the institutional knowledge to do their job to their full effect. It's been tough. It's been really tough on them. And that's where we need to start to make a difference. Yes, the budget's going to be important. Whoever he puts in as head of these agencies and departments is going to send a message. And whether the president reinforces the basically the proposals that come forward as to how to move these things forward. He can't do it all himself. He won't do it all himself. You cannot micromanage as the president of the United States. There are too many things. You've got to bring together a team that you trust, but that is competent and capable and understands their responsibilities and has some background to take on these jobs. And then you tell them the basic direction you want to go or what you want them to accomplish, and let them try to figure out how to do that in the best way possible.
Well, Governor Whitman, you've been there, you've led the Environmental Protection Agency, and it's reassuring to hear your perspective on these issues. Thank you very much.
No, it's my pleasure. Always good to talk to you, Kent.
Funding for Governor's Perspectives with Kent Manahan has been provided by New Jersey Manufacturers Insurance Group, Seton Hall University, and Seton Hall School of Law.